And welcome into this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and the Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Toronto Maple Leafs podcast your first listen of the day. For anyone on the Toronto Maple Leafs feed, let me introduce myself. My name is Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Panthers. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And thankful to be doing this crossover edition of the show with the hosts of Locked On Leafs, Mike DiStefano and David Morassutti. Gentlemen, how are you guys?
I'm doing well, man. It's a first. I mean, it's the first time I've gotten to meet you in person. So this is in person on what we do here. So this is fun.
Face to computer, face to computer.
Basically, nice. We're seeing face to face from a screen, So definitely know what you meant there.
For people who live here in Toronto, to be able to sit here and sit face to face with someone in Florida, we've come a long way as a society. I mean, I think we could all agree with that, right?
Absolutely, definitely. We've come a long way, and hey, let's get right into it, guys. And the first one I wanna discuss really is the season that Toronto had. Of course, Florida and Toronto were really battling out for that top spot in the Atlantic last year. Really changing that third matchup between the two teams, and of course, this past season for the Leafs. I felt like it was probably one of their biggest chances to finally win around. And of course, this past season was a lot different than what happened against Montreal, and really challenged Tampa Bay to better than what Florida did in round 2. That's for sure. And now there comes a different feel for the GM and the head coach. I know Mike was talking about how when Sheldon Keefe got his extension, is like, don't be too excited about it. It's about seeing what he can do with this team. And of course, Kyle Dubas, just a few weeks ago, they say that there's not going to be an extension for him going into the season, at least last time I checked. What's the feeling on the coach and the GM for Toronto?
Well, I'll take this one first, Dave. I mean, to say that they're on the hot seat, I think, is a little bit much. Like, they're not on the hot seat unless they struggle. The thing is, I don't anticipate struggles out of the gate. I think this team's going to have a very successful regular season. The problem is the full evaluation of these guys aren't going to be throughout the 82-game regular season. It's going to be, what do they do in that 2-week window in late April, right? Like, that's the problem with talking about what the situation is with Kyle Dubas and with Sheldon Keefe. You're right. Dubas is coming into the year. He's in a contract year, and they did not opt to give him any sort of extension to this point. I guess that could change between now and opening night, but apparently, that's not the case. He's going to go into the year as a lame duck GM, as they say. But ultimately, there's a lot of pressure on these guys, and it's really going to come down to, again, do they have that success in the playoffs? Because if they don't, and it's another first-round exit, then yeah, there's going to be a lot of chatter about those guys and whether or not they're the duo that could lead this team to the promised land. But ultimately, I think, I like what they've done. I think they've assembled a pretty good group. I think Sheldon Keefe has shown improvements in his coaching tenure the last 3 years he's been here. But ultimately, again, they got to perform in the playoffs in order to kind of keep their jobs and get the flies off them over the last couple of years.
And for me, like, listening to Sheldon Keefe talk about playing Mitch Marner defense, I'm just like, Sheldon, you don't have to show that the pressure of coaching Toronto is totally making you go crazy. But no, I think they're trying their best to make sure that the focus isn't on them, but not in the places that it shouldn't be, right? Kyle Dubas has tried very hard to make sure that no one's talking about the fact that he is on his last year's deal. It's not going to stop the chatter, but he wants to make sure that the team focuses on the task at hand and not what their future's like. I'm sure some of the players are wondering that, just like any player is on any team. So I agree with Mike as well. Like, they've done their best to always try to figure out why were we coming up short? What can we do to get better? But at the end of the day, it's going to be more so on the players and what they do than I think what Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe do, because at some point, the roster you put together, they're the ones that are going to have to carry you. You can't just expect the coach and the GM to do everything and put as much support in place. The players are the ones that are ultimately going to have to be the ones to get the job done.
Yeah, and especially with Mitch Marner breaking his goalless drought from a few years ago in the most recent postseason, that's an encouraging sign that this is a team that's possibly growing and getting to that next level, because I didn't see a sign of I could possibly have seen that last year's version of Toronto possibly make a possible run if had they not run into Tampa Bay. Who knows what they could have faced off against a Florida had they met in the second round, because Florida did not even look good in round one against Washington. Next question I have for you guys is really John Tavares. He's going to be missing some time coming up. I believe the first 2 weeks of the season, if I'm not mistaken. But what's the line's gonna look like for Toronto? I know he was playing second line center, and I know there's been a lot of criticism going John Tavares' way after the deal that he got just a few years ago.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so I know that there's kind of conflicting reports of how much time he will miss. Sheldon Keefe said that there is a possibility he could start the season. Oblique injuries are such a tough one to try to figure out when exactly. You don't want to rush the guy back and have it get re-aggravated and him sit out longer. So they're going to take the right approach with him, because, yeah, for him to miss the start of the season, obviously not ideal, because then he's going to have to play a little bit of catch up. But
the original timeline at the time of the injury was 3 weeks, right? Minimum 3 weeks. And from that time of the injury until that 3-week point, he would miss the first 4 games of the season, which they'll at least play 4 games. And I think it's the first 6 or 7 nights of the year. So, he is going to be out for the first week. And to Dave's point, it's weird because obliques, again, can be tricky if they don't heal quick. It's not something that you can you can try and play through it, but it's not going to work, especially like that's where you get a lot of your explosiveness. A lot of it's in your core. Any sport you're playing, your core is so important. So it is going to be interesting to see how he can try and come back from it. Hopefully he does come back soon, because I think we both were at the very least anticipating a bit of a bounce back here, more specifically at 5-on-5, where his production kind of fell off last season and was lackluster. Got a lot of power play cookies, which made his final points look all right. I think he was like 76 points in 78 games or something like that. And, if you don't dive deep and inspect those to find out where those points came from, that sounds all right. But ultimately, a lot of them came on the power play. There was a lot of secondary points that he was able to kind of piggyback off of that top unit off of. But a healthy offseason, we all expected maybe Tavares can go in and have himself a decent little bounce back year in the same way that Steven Stamkos had going into his 31-year-old season. So there was a lot of hope, and that oblique injury kind of set him back a wee little bit. In terms of what the lines look like with him out, your guess is as good as ours. They're kind of filtering through, trying to see exactly what works. Today in practice, we saw William Nylander down the middle. I did see Sheldon Keefe did say, don't read too much into it. We're just trying some things. So I don't think he's going to end up being the guy. But both of us kind of have our money on. Dave, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we both do. Out Kerfoot being the player who is going to step in as the second line center in absence of Tavares for however long he's out for.
Yeah, something similar to when Tavares was out in that playoff series against Montreal. Kerfoot was the one that was moved, that played a center, and then Nylander would be on the right. And then on the left, many are expecting it to be Nick Robertson, could be somebody else, depending on how Sheldon Keefe wants to. He's trying
Engvall was out there today. Engvall back in practice.
Exactly.
He was out there alongside Kerfoot. So who knows what ends up happening with those lines.
He's keeping us guessing, unfortunately.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, and there's only so much that we could read off of what's in practice and what Daily Faceoff says. Daily Faceoff has Willem Nylander and Calle Yarncrook there. I saw Dennis Malgin is there, part of the Mason Marchment trade. He's back with the Leafs. He's got a couple
Well,
of goals to begin the preseason from what I saw. So happy to see Dennis Mulligan is back for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And
yeah, we never talk about that trade on this podcast ever at all, Armando. That's never been brought up, not one time in the last 2 years, not once.
And there's never been any Twitter exchanges between our accounts on that either.
No, never.
For sure. This is one that I just don't understand the conversation behind any possible rumors of Auston Matthews, about a possibility of him going to Arizona, and 2 years left on his deal. The cap's gonna go up. He's the face of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I just don't get why people are saying that he's going to leave. And I when you talk about how much where Arizona is as a franchise, being in a 5,000 seat arena versus the biggest media market in hockey, like would it be crazy for me to say 99.99% chance that Auston Matthews is not only going to be a Maple Leaf for life, but he is going to become the highest paid player in the NHL when he's up for a new deal?
Yeah, I believe that he will. He will end up surpassing what Nathan MacKinnon got just a few weeks ago. I really do. He's kind of the next big dog who is up for renewal that could surpass MacKinnon. And then what is it, the year after that? I think McDavid's up and he'll probably pass Matthews, and they'll just kind of start resetting each other's markets from that point. But look, I mean, there's this doomsday clock that a lot of people have put on Auston Matthews in the next 2 seasons. You know, Toronto has 2 years to prove to Matthews that they can win with this team. They can win with this ownership, this management, this leadership, this coaching staff, this group that they have. They have 2 years to figure it out for him to sign. I have no inkling that he wants to leave. Like, I get it. He's from Arizona, and that's really the only link that anyone possibly could say for why he wants to go to that place. I mean, they're playing in a college rink. A college rink for, like, it's ridiculous what's going on in Arizona right now. And that's not just for this year. This is for the next 3 years, Armando. The next 3 years, the third year, the season that he's a UFA. So you think that his first season as an Arizona Coyote, he's going to want to play at Arizona State? Get out of here with that nonsense. I never bought that whatsoever. If Auston Matthews wants to play in Toronto, there'll be a basically blank check. What do you want? You're coming back here, pal. I'm not worried about it one bit. I don't think he's going to command like a stupid amount of money, probably like $14-ish million, but the guy's already making 11.5. So it's only actually an extra like $2.5 million on the cap. That's not crazy to overcome when you look at the increase that we're going to see in the cap 2 years from now. Could be up to, I think it's 87.5 million that it could climb to that year, 2 years from now. So that's an extra $5 million. You can have half of it already with Auston Matthews. So honestly, whether he's a Leaf for life, I don't know. You know, you could have said the same about Gretzky. Probably was going to be an Oiler for life. It didn't happen. Thought Jerome McGinley was going to be a Flame for life. It didn't happen. There's a lot of guys who are, you know, players for life or for a long time. You know, Patrick Kane would have thought that he was going to be a Blackhawk for life. We know that that's not going to be the case because he's going to end up moving on this year, and maybe the same with Jonathan Toews. Who knows? So I don't know what's going to happen 10, 12 years from now when he's kind of in the twilight of his career, or when the team, you know, finally does end up on the other side of the window. But definitely, I think while the window's still open, there's no doubt in my mind that Auston Matthews is going to be with the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I mean, it was also just like Johnny Gaudreau was going to go be with the Devils or the Flyers, and he ends up with the Blue Jackets. Right?
He ended up with Columbus. I mean, no offense to Jay, but like Columbus. Although he's in England, so it doesn't even really matter. But
yeah, and then even Matthew Tkachuk, everyone thought St. Louis, but you know, his hometown. He wants to go back to St. Louis. Did you think that Matthew Tkachuk was going to be going to Florida?
Nope.
Right? That caught everybody off guard. Auston Matthews, though, I feel like he is where he wants to be, right? I don't know
He
where else.
said he loves the city. He considers it home.
Yeah.
What more do you need from the guy?
And
Mhm.
people like, it's Toronto's a tough place to be and live. And he goes to Arizona and he has his summer there, he has his off season there, and when he comes to Toronto, it's business,
He's the
right?
king of the city, and you know he loves it.
Oh
You
yeah,
know he loves it here.
and the fans embrace him. The embrace that fan base has for someone like him as well, of his caliber, number one overall pick as well, and it just
The
makes
guy's got people in the media rocking mustaches because they love the guy so much. We had a reporter, Terry Koshin. Did you see the guy's mustache, Dave? Auston Matthews did, and he made sure to mention it. He was like, "Oh, nice mustache." It was awesome. So now, Austin started the trend, and now there's a couple of media members that are trying to even look a little bit like Auston Matthews. They love him so much.
where you look at that. But we're gonna transition over to segment number 2, where the guys will be asking me Florida Panther related questions throughout their off season. We're gonna discuss that next here on the show. But first, we're gonna tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, and podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering info and live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, guys. Well, second segment here. And now it's time to turn to the guys to ask me some Florida Panther related questions. Go ahead, guys.
Mike, you want to start or you want me to start?
Yeah, I can start because, we've talked about this a little bit, Dave and I, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on kind of what went down this offseason in Florida. What's the mood in the city right now when you look at last year's team coming off a President's Trophy victory, but then kind of fizzled out in the playoffs and then made a franchise-altering trade? Johnny Huberdeau out, Matt Tkachuk, actually Johnny Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar out. You bring in Tkachuk. I mean, the team's different. They've got some different elements, but are they better? What are you saying about this organization, this team going into this season? Are they a better team for the moves that they made, or is this a team that might take a step back from last year?
They're better in the long term, is that's my opinion. And they're gonna take a little bit of a hit in the short term for now. Of course, Mackenzie Weegar is as far as you're taking a number one defenseman away from your team, and of course, expiring deal. He was always going to be seen as a rental for the Panthers, even if they didn't trade him. This was probably going to be his last year with the Panthers. He was. Reports are saying that he's going to make like what Hampus Lindholm is making now, like 6.5, and there's gonna be a little bit of growing pains as far as the second and third pair. A lot of us have thought that Gus Forsling is ready to take that next step to become a number one defenseman along with Aaron Ekblad paired up. But of course, you have a veteran in Mark Stahl out there who's on the older side, and a Lucas Carlson who hasn't played a full 82 game season yet for the Panthers. So the left side of the defense is a little bit of a question mark for the Panthers. So that's really the part that for the Panthers that's really to keep an eye on, especially the left side. But as far as Matthew Tkachuk coming in and Huberdeau being shipped out, two completely different players. Matthew Tkachuk is your ultimate power forward who is not afraid to get in the dirty areas, right in the slot. Huberdeau's more of a distributor, hangs out on the wings and then finds the open teammate. I mean, just look at some of his highlights from this past season. He was just 3 assists off from setting an all-time assist record for wingers last season. just off of Nikita Kucherov in 2019 and Jaromir Jagr in 1996. So it's a little bit of a different look for the Panthers because, but also think about this: Jonathan Huberdeau is 29, Matthew Tkachuk is 24. What contract is likely going to look better at the tail end of it? And this is a power play throughout the postseason that went 1 for 31, and the
You think
MVPs.
Huberdeau was the problem there?
The main stars were the problem. Barkov doesn't get a slide neither. He's partially responsible as well, as well as Andrew Burnett for not making the adjustments necessary until it was too late. So that something needed to have a little bit of a shakeup for this team. 122 points and getting swept out of the second round when they had more goals outside of winning round 2. Bill Zito thought that something had to happen, and that included a trade and a coach. And it's a lot of changes for a 122 point team, but this is about thinking long term for this team.
Yeah, because I even looked at your cap situation like that. That Keith Yandel buyout must be hurting you guys because you don't have that buyout. You likely can get another defenseman that can play in your top 4 at least, because that's what over $5 million paid out to somebody that's not even on your team. And then my other thing with the Panthers is how it feels like the next 3 years, because you guys, I think you traded away your first round picks. Like it feels like there's probably a lot of pressure on this team to perform because so much has been invested. Now I know that eventually things will look a little better, and you have Barkov and Tkachuk around for the long haul. But is there concern about it's going to be tough to make it things like better for this Panthers team without a major subtraction again? Like, how do you guys view the where the team can find ways to improve with so little flexibility?
And to build off that, I think the concern from an outsider's perspective, like when I go to Cap Friendly or if I go to Daily Faceoff and I look at the roster that's being boasted out there by the Florida Panthers, there's not a whole lot of depth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Correct.
Rudolph Balcers might end up in this team's top 6, right? And like he's a guy who couldn't really stick in Ottawa and in San Jose over the last couple of years. All of a sudden, is he going to be your Huberdeau replacement or a replacement for Anthony Duclair, who's injured for a while? It seems like a bit of a stretch. Now, probably said the same thing about Verhaeghe a couple of years ago, and he turned out to be all right. But still, I look at that team. I don't see a whole lot of depth up front, but more so, I know you touched on it. I have concerns about that blue line and that back end. Like once you get past Ekblad, it gets a little dicey now that Uyghur's gone. And Ekblad's a guy who hasn't been fully healthy for a season in 4 or 5 years at this point.
Last 2 or 3.
Big roll the dice to go into the year with the blue line that they've got, in my opinion. I don't know how you're feeling over in Florida about it.
Yeah, for Ekblad, he's of course he came back for game 1 of the playoffs. Of course, I'm not going to hold anything against Ekblad after missing 2.5 months. I mean, he didn't even play. His first game playing with Claude Giroux last season was in game 1 of the playoffs. So it was just as they got him. And you guys touched on all the draft picks that they gave up. 2 of the 4 first round picks that they traded, those guys are right now mainstays. Matthew Tkachuk, the 2025 first round pick that they traded, 8-year deal you got out of that. Sam Reinhart, they were able to get his RFA rights and extend them. The thing that hurts really is what happened last season with trading for Ben Sherratt, a 2023 first round pick, which is right now an unprotected pick now for the Canadiens. Ooh. And 2024, which is the Claude Giroux deal, of course, putting Owen Tippett there. But they're going to have to rely on developing their prospects. And right now, their first round pick from 2017, Grigori Denisenko, didn't survive the second round of cuts for the Panthers. He's going to start the season in Charlotte. So he might be the biggest trade piece for the Florida Panthers. And Bill Zito's not going to have likely not going to have an aggressive trade deadline this time around like he did last year. And a lot of these moves of buying out Keith Yandel's deal, trading away Henrik Borgstrom, and also clearing Brett Connolly's contract, is really mostly what's happened with the previous management of clearing some of those moves for the Panthers, trading Anton Stroman and giving a second round pick to Arizona because he had a high cap hit as well. So in 3 years with Bill Zito at the helm, only 3 players remained from the Florida Panthers when they were in the Toronto bubble just in August of 2020.
Wow.
Barkov, Ekblad, Sergei Bobrovsky. Everyone else was not on that roster. And the fact that the retooling happened without rebuilding and you still get a division championship, President's Trophy, and you get a first round win for the first time in 26 years.
It's impressive.
That's an encouraging resume that Bill Zito has built. So with the limited cap space that they do have, and I don't wish anyone to go on LTIR. That's not what I wish. But with the limited amount of cap space you have, this is the time for Bill Zito to get a little bit creative.
So is it more of a "in Bill we trust" type of mantra in Pantherland right now?
I would definitely say so because if he was able to do go through that much roster turnover and still build a contending team, then yes, and even this team on paper is still a playoff team. Are they Stanley Cup contenders? Probably not.
So that's my question, because like last year they were cup contenders. Like I would say with the roster they had, the way that they were playing, I mean, they won the President's Trophy for Pete's sake. They're definitely cup contenders. Is it fair to say that maybe, and because I also say this because you said earlier that you feel like the trade that they made, the moves they made in the offseason, perhaps will end up costing them or hurting them short term, but will be better off long term for it. Would you say that maybe what Bill Zito did by making the moves that he's done so far, perhaps this is just a situation where he's moving the window back like 2 years, and then hopefully in a couple of seasons, when guys like Anton Lundell and maybe Denisenko finally pulls through, and some other draft picks can maybe come through at some point, those guys will be ready to contribute, and Tkachuk will be kind of in the middle of his prime in 25, 26 years old. Is that, and Spencer Knight, obviously another young up and coming stud goaltender. Hopefully he'll be starting to round out into a top echelon goalie. Like, is that how it feels like the Panthers are maybe addressing this year and next, just kind of punting and moving their window from win now to we'll stay competitive now, but I think we'll be better off in 2 years and we could really go after it again then?
That's the sense that I'm getting. And weirdly, in this franchise's history, that them existing since 1993, this is the longest consecutive streak of them even being in the postseason. So this is unfamiliar territory for the Panthers and their fans as well. So it seems to be because if they kept Huberdeau and extended him and even extended Uyghur, their window could have been only 1 to 2 years, and there could have been like a more sense of urgency to win now. And if you have those two on long-term deals, there could have been an opportunity for this team to either A, plateau, or B, like go fall right flat on their face with how those contracts, and you just don't have the flexibility with those guys being on your team, and it's going to be a little difficult making trades. Luckily for Zito, though, which this extension I did not see happening now with Spencer Knight. Of course, they have the most expensive goalie tandem right now in the NHL. But in year 3 of his bridge deal, that's also when Sergei Bobrovsky's no move clause becomes a modified no trade clause, a 16-team no trade clause. So that could be the time where a move could happen to make him the number one guy. But in those first 2 years, if Bobrovsky does perform to the level that he did last season, then it's great for the Panthers. It's great for their department because next year, even with the most expensive goalie tandem, there's still $11 million for the Panthers to play with next offseason.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I know. I know. I found that the Spencer Knight contract. The timing I get, you have a young stud goaltender. You spent the first round pick on him. You want to keep him around. It was just the Sergei Bobrovsky part of it, that's where I was just like,
Yep.
that's tough because of how much Spencer Knight is making too. But I can see where, yeah, the cap looks a little bit better next year, especially if the cap goes up. The Florida will get a little bit of relief. So as Mike says, it's going to be, looks like maybe a little bit of short term pain, but I think the Panthers also understand that the Atlantic division is getting tough, and they need to stay as competitive as they can because you can't be complacent with this division.
Absolutely not. And what both Sergei Bobrovsky's long-term deal and Spencer Knight's bridge deal all expire at the same time. So if Spencer Knight performs to what Panther fans hope to be, he'll possibly double that salary that he has, and it won't hurt the Panthers cap, and it'll be less than what they're making combined on the next deal. So that's really has been the hope. And they were acquired in the same offseason, Spencer Knight being drafted 10 days before Sergei Bobrovsky was signed. So it looks like Dale Talon at the time seemed to have had a direction with the goaltending department, but hey, Bill Zito's taking advantage of the young goaltender, even though the cap hit maybe was higher than anticipated. But hey, we'll work with the Panthers will work with what they got in the next few years. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3. We're going to play a little game of co-sign or no sign, and also speak about the rest of the Atlantic Division and finishes. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Toronto Maple Leafs podcast. Third and final segment here on this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Mike DiStefano and David Morassutti here. And let's play this little game of co-sign or no sign. And I didn't ask this about this player in the first segment. I wanted to wait until now to ask. So the goalie that the Leafs acquired this offseason, of course, there's been a lot of questions about injuries and so many times spent on IR. Like a lot of transactions from Cap Friendly, a lot of them had to do with Matt Murray, and of course, a very encouraging preseason so far for him. I think I saw 40 of 45 so for Matt Murray. So co-sign or no sign for you guys. Matt Murray will be the main starter for the Toronto Maple Leafs by season's end.
Oh, cosign. I mean, he's the starter for the team on day one. And so are you asking me if I think he'll hang on to the starter's job?
Both injuries and performance.
I'll stay optimistic here. I'll stay optimistic, and I'll co-sign it. I think Dave might have a different answer, but I'm going to co-sign this one. I what we've seen so far, he kind of just looks a lot more calm. He looks a little bit more poised, polished. He looks more comfortable in net, and I think that counts and matters for something. He looks a little bit more confident as well, and the health. You look at the health the last couple of years. Some of it was a little out of his control. Like he was hit with the COVID bug. He got sick a couple of times, and I will there be an injury? Will he miss time at some point this season? Perhaps. A lot of goaltenders do. Jack Campbell missed a lot of time last year as well, and he was this team's number one. But ultimately, I don't think that he's going to lose the job per se. I think that he'll be able to hang on to it, play well enough all year long, where come game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs, he's the guy that they turn to. I'll co-sign it.
Yeah, the only reason why I'm hesitant to co-sign it is because of the injury path. It's not just with Toronto too. It's also from his time with Pittsburgh. He's dealt with all that. And the other reason too is Ilya Samsonov has not Matt Murray has been excellent in the preseason. If you look at the way he's played, Ilya Samsonov has not been bad either. Right? He's right behind him if in that order, and like they're going to make sure that both these guys get their due. So the Leafs might not have a defined starting goaltender for at least to start the season. I think they're going to give both these guys the looks. And even if Matt Murray doesn't have the same injury problems of the past, the Leafs have had some very bad luck with goaltending injuries, especially
Yeah.
last year with Jack Camp. I mean, there was a point in time where they went
Freddie
with
the year before that, and the year before that, and
Yeah.
there's plenty years of goaltending injury history here in Toronto. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm hoping that the trend gets bucked this year. Again, I think there'll probably will be a time where he misses, a couple of weeks here and there, but ultimately, I think he'll still be this team starter come game one of the playoffs.
Yeah, and it just reminded me of when you spoke about goalie injuries, about what happened to Eric Shalgren the day that the Panthers had that comeback against Toronto, and then insert Jack Campbell there in that one as well. So I was just thinking about the luck or lack thereof for Toronto, just going back to just one game.
Yeah.
And yeah, so hey, he's a two-time Stanley Cup champion for a reason. I know that in one of the runs you had to have Marc-Andre Fleury come in for a couple of games, but hey, that's why you have a tandem, and Matt Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury together. That was just a great tandem that they had there. And Samsonov, the Panthers are very familiar with him as well. That he was Vitek Vanacek started the series against the Panthers and then pulled after in the third period of game 2, and then Samsonov finished the rest. So a lot of familiarity that the Panthers have with both goaltenders. That's for sure. All right, guys. So what's your cosign or no sign for me? I know prior to recording, Mike said that he has a spicy one for me.
I do, so I'll save it and I'll let Dave go with his first.
So mine, it's a little out there, but I'm gonna test the waters here to see what you think about the Panthers and whether you think there are more moves to be made with this team. And there's one defenseman out there. We talked about how they need a left shot defenseman. There is a defenseman trying to get out of Arizona, and that is Jacob Chychrun. I know the Panthers are lacking a little bit of the trade bait stuff, things that they will need to get a deal done. But I think the Florida Panthers will try to be one of those teams to go and get Jacob Chychrun. Cosign or no sign?
I say no sign because I think if there was a time to trade for Jacob Chychrun, it would have been last season. It would have been earlier for them. And the thing is, Jacob Chychrun's a South Florida guy. So he's from the area. So it would be so cool to bring Jacob Chychrun home. But the latest reports I've seen is possibly Ottawa as trying to fill their blue line. And even I saw today that he might even be interested in Columbus to go there. So I don't think that I would want a Jacob Chychrun here, and his contract is so team friendly. I think it's like 3 more years at four something.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was thinking that.
It's a really good contract for what Jacob Chychrun can bring. But I think with the lack of assets that they have, and Jacob Chychrun, I think this is the season also to trade him. How are the Panthers going to fit him? I just don't know how. I just don't see a scenario where Jacob Chychrun is traded to the Florida Panthers.
All right. Cosign, no sign. William Nylander. William Nylander is the name I'm using. Will outproduce Matthew Tkachuk this season.
How many points did Nylander have last season?
80.
80. Matthew Tkachuk had a 104.
Are you expecting him to have that type of production again this year?
I see. I think Matthew Tkachuk is maybe like a 93, 95 point guy next season. There's going to be a little bit of growing pains.
Do you guys see he came in as the number 19 player, by the way, on TSN's top 50 list? One spot ahead of Alex Ovechkin.
Wow. That's
no
nuts.
offense, but that's ludicrous. In my opinion.
Wow. I'm going to say no sign on that one. I just think with Tkachuk just coming into his own at 24 years old, his very first 100-point season, I think this is just the beginning of his prime. And and so I just think that it's just the beginning for Matthew Tkachuk. He might take a little bit of a step back as far as point production, but as far as what the team might need, they just need a net front presence in front of the net, and they already had one in Sam Reinhart. Matthew Tkachuk is in my opinion going to add that extra layer for the Florida Panthers 5-on-5, and especially on the power play. And we're talking about a power play unit that finished top 5 in the regular season, but it's about really translating that in the postseason, and that's really where the Panthers are really looking for Matthew Tkachuk to just be that net front presence. And hey, you never know with a bouncing puck, and if Matthew Tkachuk's right place, right time, hey, he finds a way to score in so many different ways. So that's a 24-point difference. I'm not sure if 24 points would in just one season, maybe in a few seasons, but as far as next season, I'm going to say no sign.
I'll say this though, he's never outside of last year. He was never at a point per game pace the way that William Nylander was last season either. So last year was a really big year for him. It's just whether or not he can continue it in Florida with a completely different situation, different system, different players, different teammates, different philosophy. I am very much intrigued to see how Matt Tkachuk works out near one in Florida. Very much intrigued.
I'm excited for him, and he's going to be reuniting with Sam Bennett as well. It looks like that they're going to be paired on that second line. So it looks like they're going to be playing together again. And Sam Bennett has also had a little bit of resurgence in his career, shifting back to center and being in a top 6 role versus what he was in Calgary. So, hey, some familiarity is there, and it's great that they are starting off at least in the beginning of the season together.
Well, how'd they do when they were in Calgary? Sam Bennett wasn't terrific.
Yeah.
Well, he's a different guy. He's got more confidence now. I actually like Sam Bennett. I'm glad that he's turned his game around and found it in Florida. I think it'll continue. I'm just busting your chops on that one. But if I were to have said Mitch Marner, though, would outproduce Matt Tkachuk, where would you go with that one? Cosign or no sign?
Cosign.
Okay.
Mitch Marner outproducing Matthew Tkachuk. It's because he's been with the Leafs for a while. Matthew Tkachuk's going into a new situation, so I think that's an easy cosign.
Yeah, that's why I went with Nylander. I felt like that was the more debatable discussion to have between the two players. So that's ultimately why I went there. Anyways, this is fun. This is good. I'm glad we're able to get this crossover done. Are we doing the power ranking the divisions? Is that what you wanted to do?
Well, not necessarily power rankings, but like where do you see Toronto finishing in the division as far as regular season? They're over under for Bet Online has them as 107.5. The Panthers are 105.5. I think it's just about right. And for the listeners out there, Locked On will be presenting later next week all the hosts of whether they think they agree with their over-unders. Do you see Toronto as division champions, 2-3? Where do you see them finishing?
Tippy top. I think they end up in the tippy top. I do. I think the Leafs are I'm more optimistic about this team's goaltending than most. And realistically, I don't know if you know this, your listeners know this, but this team had 115 points last year. They had 900 goaltending. 900 goaltending was with it. So if they get just league average, which last year was 908, imagine how many more games they'll win. Their record when they got 900 gold, that was their average. But the record when they actually got it, they're 33-4-1 or something like that. So if they can get 900 to 910 goaltending throughout this year, I absolutely think that this team, with the offense that they have, the amount of goals that they're going to get from that top 6, whether it's from Marner, who's all of a sudden shooting the puck. He had a career high 36 last year. He'll be pushing to try and do that again. I think Nylander's kind of coming into his own. I think he's going to have a terrific season, point per game pace. Obviously, you've got your back-to-back Rocket Richard winner and Auston Matthews, who's going to try and break, the 65-70 goal mark that he was trying to chase down last year. And then you got John Tavares, Michael Bunting. Like there's a whole bunch of different guys out there who could put pucks in the back of the net if you're Toronto. They got another young kid, Nick Robertson, who potentially could go out there and score some goals this year and have himself a good kind of rookie campaign. So I like what the Maple Leafs got going on. The number of 107.5 seems like slightly high because they've only actually eclipsed that number one time in their franchise history, but it was last year. And I think they can replicate a lot of what they did a season ago. So I actually think that they can go over that number and finish atop of this division. I really, really do.
And the reason why I also think that too, they do not want another situation where they might play the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Panthers again.
Yeah, that
I
too.
think they realized the mistake they made of not finishing first in the division last year. If they do not play Tampa in round one, I don't think we're talking about the Leafs having a first round exit. So I think they realize the regular season has to mean something because it can make their lives that much easier in the playoffs.
They had a brutal record against teams that were under 500, like a brutal record. If they can win those games like they're supposed to, this team last year, if they would have done that, they would have finished first in the division realistically because they had one of the best records against playoff teams in the entire NHL. If they can just win like half of the amount that they lost last year against the Buffaloes and the Ottawas and the LAs of the world, the San Jose, like they lost a game to Arizona for Pete's sake. They lost both their games to Arizona. Now that I think about it, lost both games to Arizona. That's leaving points, valuable points on the board. If they can get those this year, then yeah, I think they could clear that bar pretty easily.
Yeah, the Panthers also got swept by a bottom feeder Western Conference team in the Seattle Kraken last year. That was one of two teams to sweep the Panthers, them and the LA Kings, the only two. But I also agree with you guys. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs will win the division, the Atlantic Division, and I think a battle of Florida in round one will happen for the third year in a row. Just the round one year, round two the other. Hey, let's see if third time's a charm for the Panthers if they to get that monkey off their back against their cross-state rivals. And for the Leafs, of course, getting that monkey off their back about now, 2004 being the last time they won a playoff series. So, hey, these are for both of these teams. These are both monkey off their back type of years for these two teams. That's for sure.
Yeah. What was the stat when Chara retired? There's no longer an active player in the NHL who's lost a playoff series to the Maple Leafs. That's how long it's been since they've won a round.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it's insane. Absolutely insane.
Mike and I talked that his presence was a big reason for this.
We think that now that Chara's gone and Chara's retired, now it's time. Like he was the curse. Now the Leafs will be fine going forward. Yeah, that's what we believe here at Locked On Leafs.
1,000%.
Yeah,
and we have this on record.
We'll have people over at Locked On Leafs,
and we have this on record for it if it does happen. That's for sure. So, but guys, this was a lot of fun to record. Thank you guys so much for doing this crossover edition with me. Tell my listeners where they can find you guys and your work online.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. You can also find our show's Twitter at Locked On Leafs. And Dave, why don't you tell them where they can find your stuff and also tell them where they can join the Discord as well.
Yeah, we have a Discord community. It's well over 100 people. Pretty active, especially around game time. We're always talking with our Discord family there. Sorry, worst time to have a cough. And then you can find me on Twitter at @D_Morassutti. And make sure, and we're almost at 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So
yes, sub up, please. That'd be terrific.
And,
we want to get
our buddy here at Locked On Panthers and make sure your YouTube subs are going up as well.
Absolutely. We're what are we like 60 away from 2K? So we're close. Our goal is to get there by opening nights on the 12th. By the way, can we quickly talk about how the season doesn't actually open on October 11th, like they're advertising. It actually opens up on Friday in Prague.
Nashville and San Jose. Yep.
I thought those were preseason games up until today, and I was notified, no. That's the actual like soft launch of the NHL season. I'm like, that is just preposterous. They have been talking about how this was they've been talking about how the 11th was the start of the season. And I hate the fact that like Colorado and their banner going up into the rafters isn't kicking off the 2022-23 season. It actually angered me when I found that out this morning. Like there's literally like going to be regular season games Friday afternoon, and then Friday and Saturday night preseason games for the rest of the 30 teams in the NHL. How dumb is that?
Great rant for the end, but I think Ball Arena had a concert on Tuesday, which is why the Colorado Avalanche opened on the Wednesday instead, and kind of weird that the NHL is starting the season on Friday and Saturday, both 2 p.m. games, so matinee matchups between the San Jose Sharks and the Nashville Predators. But the guys on the Leafs feed, you can find me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Let's help Locked On Panthers get to 200 subscribers. Help this little small market team in a little town called Sunrise, Florida, in Western Broward County. Help the channel get their subscribers before opening night, and make sure to hit me up. And also, if you guys ever want to talk Panthers Leafs, I definitely have an open door policy there, that's for sure. But guys, this was amazing, and thank you so much once again for doing this, and I hope to get with you guys again soon.
Absolutely, man. There's four matchups between these two clubs, I think, this season, I want to say. I'm sure we could carve out a time to do another crossover before or after a Panthers Leafs game.
Absolutely. I can't wait, guys. Thank you so much.